what has to change in society where we can give our children the care they need, but also pursue our right to freedom of personal growth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the question you're asking is like, how do you hold space for both?
Right.
Right. I think this is where my time in Spain has been informative and has actually come back into play more recently in thinking about opening a second restaurant and planning out this concept and being in lease negotiations and running numbers and putting these, this second go together. I feel like Europe in general prioritizes family. And also totally.
And quality of food.
Yes.
We could learn something from our ancestors, folks.
Yeah.
Our ancestral culture, I should say.
And families aren't as spread out as they are here in the United States. And also family members are far more involved in childcare than we have here in the States.
Yeah.
However, how many times have you been in a Western, European country and you're so excited to go to this restaurant and you show up and they're closed? Right. Like, talking about not giving a fuck, like they don't give a fuck and it's your problem, deal. Whereas here, I think we kind of acquiesce to this like grueling, we've got to be open 7 days a week. We've got to capture all the revenue we can. And so again, leading up to the potential opening of a second restaurant, I've changed the way that I'm approaching this, and actually I'm running numbers by being closed 4 weeks out of the year that directly correspond to my kids' school vacations. And I think so long as you can put information out there for the public and say, here's when we're closed, this is what you can plan on, and knowing that you're saving that space and that time with your family, and reprioritizing, I think that's maybe a small place where we can affect change.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, owner of the Crown Jewel, Alex Wight. My lady Alex, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling confident.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I think your concept is really unique. You deal with unique challenges being on an island and seasonal. So I can't wait to get into that. And Krista Cole called you out. She said, I had to talk to you. We're here. We're making it happen. And before we kind of dive into the episode, real quick, anything else I should know about in terms of your portfolio beyond Crown Jewel?
No, I'm working on potentially opening a second restaurant.
Catering or anything like that?
No catering.
Special events?
Only within our season.
Okay. And what is your total gross? Give us listeners an idea of like what we're talking about.
We, I think, are within a pretty healthy margin. We're running at about 15% at the end of the season at this point. Correct.
That's awesome. Can't wait to get into the details of how you make that work. So, before we dive into who you are and how you got to where you are today, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
I deeply believe 8 years into owning Crown Jewel that you are only as good as your team.
Only as good as your team. Dive into that. Why is that? Why you deeply believe?
Well, I think my level of tan in any given summer is a giveaway of how well our team is operating or not.
How was your tan last year?
It was fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty good. When you have the right players in place and you feel like you have trust in your team, I think everyone is operating most efficiently, and things roll.
I love that. When did you know you wanted to own a restaurant?
Really young.
Really young. How young are we going?
My first job at 14 was as a busser in a little diner in Ocean Park, Maine.
Okay. Is that where you grew up?
No, but we spent the summer there.
Okay.
And actually every summer job that I held through college was in a restaurant. And I loved the theater of it. You know, like most people in this industry, I really thrived on the adrenaline.
Okay. So when you were 14, were you like living your life to become a restaurant owner? Did you like go to culinary school or hospitality school? Like, what was the path?
Yeah, I mean, the path wasn't linear. And I think really the idea of owning a restaurant was something that was more romantic, and we all know it's not romantic, than anything that I thought would really happen. So when I graduated from college in 2004, I actually worked in magazines for the first few years.
Okay.
And what I really wanted to do, or what I thought I wanted to do at the time, was work at a food magazine. Okay. And I made it.
Doing what exactly?
Working as a food editor.
Got it. And you made it?
And I didn't make it, actually. But I did make it through like the 8th cut of interviews for Gourmet Magazine when Ruth was still the editor-in-chief there. And they pared it down to myself and one other individual, and he got it. Okay. And my mom said, you know, I had been thinking about going to culinary school for a long time. And she was like, you've got to go and stop talking about it, or don't go, but you've got to stop talking about it. And I went.
So when you went for this job as the editor for a magazine, what did you do to what did you do to qualify yourself for that position? I mean, you made it pretty far, so you were qualified.
Yeah, I mean, I had been working in magazines at that point for about 3 years. I worked at Vogue and I worked at Elle Decor. Oh, wow. I was the assistant to the editor-in-chief at Elle Decor, and I edited Daniel Baloud's column at the time.
Oh, cool. Well connected, huh?
Yeah, I had a few spotty little connections at the time.
What'd you go to school for?
I was a religion major and an international relations minor.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting path. I see why you said it's not quite linear.
It's not linear at all.
So 2004, you graduate. You go for this this position with, what was the name of the magazine again?
So I worked at Vogue first and Elle Decor after that. And I was interviewing at Gourmet.
Gourmet, that's right. So you already had a degree under your belt, and now you're going back to school for culinary.
Correct.
Where did you end up going to school for culinary?
I went to the Institute of Culinary Education in New York City.
Okay. And this was like 2005, 2006?
This was in 2008.
Okay. So there was some time from when you graduated to when you went to culinary school. What were you doing in that period? Because you went for the job.
Because I was working in magazines.
Okay. So you continued to stay in magazines during that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So you kept your job with Vogue?
So when I went to culinary school, I actually ended up leaving magazines entirely. And I worked as a personal assistant and made far more money doing that than I did working at a magazine.
Interesting. I mean, these are a lot of great. Go ahead.
Oh no. And it's what got me through culinary school.
Got you.
Yeah.
These are really great. I feel like just listening, I think what gets restaurants in trouble, and I hate that this is true, that it's not enough to be a good restaurant anymore. I feel like you really have to be good at putting yourself out there and using media to propel your brand. What did you learn during this time from 2004 to 2008, working in magazines that you think you leverage today?
I think it gave me a great appreciation for aesthetics and the power of the things that are visual that surround you and how that can set a tone.
I mean, it shows. Your restaurant's beautiful. I've only been able to see photos of it. Maybe this summer I can come visit you. But yeah, why is that so important?
Because it's the way that you're introducing yourself to people, right? You're setting a tone and telling someone who you are through your space, and potentially, imparting a way that you want them to feel. And at Crown Jewel, I think that's really important.
I love that. So you go to culinary school. Mm-hmm. How long were you there?
I was there for 9 months.
9 months. So from 2008 to 2009?
Correct.
And knowing what you know now, would that have been the same path you would have taken?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think I learned more in my first restaurant job than I did in culinary school. However, I don't think I would have gotten the first restaurant job I got without going to culinary school. So it's a little bit of a catch-22.
Bingo. I think what you just said is like the only reason, good reason, significant reason to go to culinary school is the network. If you prove to people that you have it and you want it and you prove your work ethic, those professors will connect to you and they will get you in the circles you need to be in to propel your career for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. So you graduate in 2009. You still have this dream of opening a restaurant?
Yeah, totally. But it still was really romantic. So I ended up right after culinary school, I combined the media experience I had with this new, culinary base. And I went into food media. So I did a lot of freelance work. I worked at Saveur magazine in the test kitchen. I worked at Martha Stewart for a long time in their test kitchens for a number of their publications.
What exactly were you doing?
Recipe testing and development.
So when you asked me to set up my cameras and equipment earlier, I should have taken you up on the offer. How did I do?
You did great.
Okay, good. So, I mean, how did you grow during this time? Like reflecting back, like how did that serve you today?
Yeah, so I think it reinforced the power of aesthetics, right? Especially when you're preparing something to be on camera or on screen. But I think ultimately that's what drove me out of food media was that I didn't feel like I was growing and I felt really stagnant. And one of my mentors at Martha Stewart, who has now become this very celebrated cookbook author, Carla Laley Music, she pulled me aside one day and she said, look, it's really nice that this whole crop of you coming out of culinary school thinks that you can work as recipe editors. But what you don't know is that all of us have worked in restaurants for at least 10 years or more. And that's real experience. And if you want to put yourself ahead of the pack, go get a real restaurant job.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Yeah. I don't know why this message doesn't come to young people like in high school. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
I will say the name of the culinary institute that I was at, where I was sitting down. I was invited to be at this board meeting thing where they're talking about the future and like what they could do to get more high school kids in. And I had to say something. I'm like, why are you focusing on high school kids? In my experience, it's always the people that are like 24, 25, 26 years old that excel the most in your program. Like focus on that market. And they're like, that doesn't pay the bills. That was literally their response to me. We make our money on high school kids.
Wow.
And I was like, like, you're burning people's, what about their, like, what if they don't like it? Do they have money to go back to school again? Like, we're just, it's, I know, and it's like, there's so much broken with the industry and it's like little things like this. And I believe in capitalism, but like, we have to be much more conscious with our capitalism. I don't want to put words and thoughts into your mouth, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, look, this industry is notorious for underpaying people, right? We were discussing earlier that as an owner, for instance, you can't really make any money unless you own more than one restaurant. And when you go into debt, right, by going to school, going back to school and trying to dig yourself out of a hole becomes that much more difficult.
Yeah, 100%. So I have to also ask, did you watch the recent Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix?
I've only watched like 10 minutes of it, but I do have it queued up.
You do? Yeah.
I will watch it.
What was it like working for that organization? I mean, what she created is really just like impressive, but it seems like there are some things between the lines that we're supposed to pick up on viewers in terms of like reasonability.
Listen, I have all the respect in the world for Martha, and I think mostly because she doesn't give a fuck. She is unapologetic, and I love that. Yeah. She's true to who she is. That was never compromised. She knew what she wanted, and she worked to get there. Mm-hmm. And she also made sure to surround herself with the best editors, the best photographers, because she was in pursuit of excellence. And I'm sure there are plenty of critics out there, but I don't know. On a surface level, I really do admire her.
Yeah, I mean, you can't shake a stick at what she's created, and there was definitely admiration during that documentary when I was watching it, learning more about who she is and where she came from. It's an impressive story, but also just like her talent. Like she's so talented and so intelligent. She didn't just get straight into what she's doing today. Like she was like a stockbroker and like all this other stuff. Like it's an impressive story. If you haven't watched the documentary, I highly recommend it. Okay. So one thing I'm kind of curious about, living in the world of food media, like what's the reality of food media? Like in terms of like, I don't know, get into like that world a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, I think that world has changed dramatically since I was working in it, and mostly because media has shifted so much, right? So I was working in food media, let's call it 2009, when, people still bought hard copies of magazines and they had subscriptions. And so much of that has shifted online that I think that, the way that people are producing content has changed significantly. I also think that publishing companies have downsized, and so you have teams of people that are working across books, and when I say books, I mean magazines. I've been out of it for so long that I don't feel like I can really speak to what's taking place today, but I will say at the time that it was super competitive. And you had to work from the bottom and work up. You were really climbing a ladder.
Yeah. So when you're saying competitive with other people trying to earn position at the magazine.
Correct.
Got it. So when did things shift for you? When did you choose to get away from food media and what was your next focus?
Yeah. So, it was when Carla Laley Music had said to me, go get a real job.
Yeah.
effectively. So I left and I went to work for one of Daniel Baloud's restaurants. I worked for DB Bistro, which is responsible for the famous burger with the foie gras and the short rib inside. And that probably was more impactful than my 9 months at culinary school.
How long did you work here?
I was there for, I think, a year and a half.
Okay.
Up until I left to go to Spain, where I worked for a 3-star Michelin restaurant in the Basque Country.
When was that?
That was 2010.
2010.
So, by the way, all these years, like, let's put a little asterisk next to them.
Okay. I like my mind works chronologically too, and it's cool. I don't know. It's like my center line. It's how I keep things straight. So, Daniel Baloud.
Yeah.
How did you evolve? How did you grow as a professional? Like really, like what impression did he make on you?
So really, I worked with his right-hand man at that time, Olivier Mueller, who I credit with, giving me some real grit and resiliency. I was the only female in the kitchen at that time. And actually I was the only female in the kitchen for a year and a half. And he said to me in the first week of working, if I didn't cry, that he would help me, which I'm sure is like super problematic to say today. But it was true. And those guys, those guys worked really, really, really hard, to get me to quit.
Yeah.
And it was about the 3-month mark that I think things turned around.
Do you think they were really trying to get you to quit?
Or for sure.
Okay. What does that look like?
Like hiding mise en place and, being terrible and saying mean things and making a point of letting you know that they're going out, but you're not included. And, just being shitty all around. But
you're also like applauding him for like helping you get that grit. So was this, do you think, a good thing or a bad thing?
He was, again, Olivier was Danielle's right-hand guy. So he, oversaw a lot of different restaurants in the city at the time, but primarily was at DB Bistro.
Okay.
And he was aware that this stuff was going on. The team was largely French, a lot of kids that were working on visas. And, they also didn't believe that a woman had a place in the kitchen. But luckily, Olivier did. And I just kept pushing, and he kept rewarding me with moving me up station by station
Didn't
by
cry.
station, and I didn't cry.
Okay. So what did it look like after 3 months? So like you proved yourself, you didn't cry, you worked hard. How did the relationship change thereafter?
Yeah, I think like the verbal hazing kind of came to an end when it was clear that I was there to stay. And that I wasn't popping in and popping out, and that I was serious about what I was doing. That's when things started to shift.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's be profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
You know, I kind of understand why they would do that. I think there's a lot of people that earn a stage, or because of who they know, they get their foot in the door, and it takes energy. Yeah, sometimes these people aren't making a lot of money, but you are also putting time and energy into lifting them up. That if they just decide to leave after 3 months or a month, that's energy you could have given to somebody else that's going to stick around for a year and a half, you know? And I think that it's important that the stagiaire understands that you're an investment. You know, it's a two-way street. You know, you're there to learn, and they're there to also have a person to lean on when the time comes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think we've lost that today, right? Like this industry has always, I think, had a revolving door, right? It's hard to hang on to people for a while, but there is a definite generational shift in terms of people's work ethics, their loyalty, their motivation, and that sense of earning your place, right? And knowing that the time that someone else is investing into you is valuable, right? I think it's harder to find those individuals these days.
Why do you think that is? What's shifting that makes that the case?
Because I think, as I said, I think there's this real generational shift in this sort of 20 to 40 something demographic where through no fault of their own, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, but they're looking for more of a work-life balance, right? Like we hear that all the time. And the restaurant industry is absolutely grueling. And I think that especially since the pandemic, people are working to find ways to create healthier pathways through the industry for sure. But it's a softer generation. And the commitment level is different. The grit is different. The resiliency is different. I can't imagine myself or anyone in my cohort at that time calling out for any reason other than something really grave. And now, people call out because their dog is sick or make it up, right? Right. It's different.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like there was a shift that needed to happen. Like I think the pendulum swung so far in one direction where it was like unsafe mentally and physically to go to work in the restaurant industry. And I think the pendulum needed to kind of swing back, but like when does it stop swinging, and where can we just have it be fixed at a reasonable place? Like what's that look like, right? So like one side, like I applaud those people who come in and kind of draw the line in the sand and say like, I'm going to work for you, but like it's also going to be on my terms a little bit, because I feel like it forced the industry to move in a more reasonable direction. But like how far can we go before it's just like unfeasible? Like it's hard to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, it's hard to have a balance.
Right. That's
Yes.
the magic word. So, what else about like business? Like, how did he, like, what did you learn working under Daniel Baloud, his restaurants, that like really stuck with you and like is a part of what you do today?
I think much like Martha, it's a feeling of not being willing to settle, right? That you are looking for perfection and surrounding yourself with people who share that goal, and the importance of aiming high and really like swinging for the fences, if you will, and the impact that has.
Yeah. And you were working in the kitchen, right?
Correct.
So you didn't really get into like the financials and like the higher like business planning, business strategy side of things?
Not at all.
Okay. What about when you went to, was it France or Spain?
Spain. Yeah. So I speaking of stages, I did a stage there. I worked for Martin Barasetegui. He has or did have 7 restaurants throughout Spain at the time. And his restaurant in San Sebastian was his 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Got it. And again, this was centered around food.
Correct.
Right. I know food is very important to the restaurant industry, but I do like to focus on the things that I don't think are discussed enough, like the business side of restaurants. When did that happen for you? When did you start pivoting away? I introduced you as the owner of Crown Jewel. So when did your focus go from the kitchen to the business?
Yeah, great question. I am lucky that I was able to purchase the property that houses Crown Jewel. And when I committed to purchasing that property and opening a restaurant is when I got a very fast education on numbers.
Which is why I think a lot of restaurants fail, because they're so focused on the food. And I think it's partly due to the media, which elevates and puts all the focus on the food. We get so enamored and like mystified by it that we forget that that has to make money. Mm-hmm. So 2018 is when you opened Crown Jewel.
Yeah.
Is there anything between Spain that was 2010 asterisk?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And then I came back to New York. They tried to get me to go to Danielle, but I really wanted to work for a small boutique-y.
So first they're trying to get rid of you. Now they're trying to keep you. What's going on?
Well, I did leave, and I did try to leave before I knew actually I had gotten that stage. It was a little after a year of being there, and I wanted to leave something that felt very corporate and go to something that was boutique. And when I told...
So Daniel Baloud's restaurants felt corporate.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Dinex Group, right? It is a corporation. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of benefits to working for a larger corporation, but I wanted to see what it was like to be owned independently.
What were the biggest benefits that you got from that experience?
Oh, like having HR, for instance, and really clearly defined managers, having a hierarchy, but with a good impact.
Yeah. What did you learn about hierarchy?
Systems and organization.
What did those systems look like?
I mean, they really operate on a brigade system there within the kitchen. But I think what I came out of that experience with is when there was a problem, it was dealt with efficiently because it was very clear where you needed to go when there was a problem.
Yeah. I think we beat up hierarchies sometime. We want to create a culture of flat hierarchy where everyone feels seen and valued. But at the same time, there needs to be a channel of communication and there needs to be accountability. So like you need that parts of the hierarchy. So what parts are good of a hierarchy? Which parts are the bad parts of the hierarchy?
Yeah, I think when someone's abusing their power, just, to inflate their ego, that's when it becomes problematic, right? But when that hierarchy, reinforces systems and organizes your team, that's when I think they're beneficial.
Got it. So you choose to move away from the corporate model. You get a lot of benefits and lessons from this experience to find something more boutique. What was calling to you about the boutique?
Because the idea of owning a restaurant was starting to become more of a reality and an end goal. So I went to work for a guy by the name of Jack Lamb, who owned 3 restaurants in New York at that time. Jewel Baco, which was a very famous sushi restaurant, Jack's Luxury Oyster Bar, and Degustation.
Okay.
And I went to Degustation.
And how long were you with this group?
A little over a year, I guess.
Okay. What kind of food was Degustation doing?
So they were doing small plates that were rooted in Spanish cuisine. It was a like U-shaped tasting counter. We didn't serve anything a la carte. It was just a tasting menu. And the chef at the time was Wesley Genevart. He has since moved to Vermont and opened 2 very successful restaurants there. But the food was really forward thinking and exciting enough that all of those culinary heavy hitters used to come in late night. And when I say, heavy hitters, I'm talking about people like Danielle, for instance, or Eric Repair. And they found this young guy really exciting.
Got it. Any key lessons on the world of boutiques? Like what like juxtaposized for you? Did I just make up a word? What stood out? Like what was like, okay, this is different. I'm going to need to know this and tuck this away to leverage later in life.
You are more valuable when you know how to do more jobs in the building.
And that wasn't on your radar before?
No.
So how did you figure that out?
When, for instance, the chef that came in and replaced Wesley walked out 2 months later, and all of a sudden, you're sort of, it's a terrible expression, but like left holding Herman and have to kind of figure it out.
It's this weird balance of like, you need to know your lane and stay in it, and like delegate 80% of the work that you shouldn't be doing and focus on the 20% of the work that only you can do as good as you. But what happens when you do have to step into that role? Like you shouldn't have to be doing everything, but you should be able to do everything.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's a weird balance.
And that doesn't change as an owner, by the way.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I can relate. I set up the cameras. I scheduled the interview. I'm doing the like you can't do it all as good as having people who specialize in that thing. So like know what you're really good at. So I'm curious. So why aren't you the chef of Crown Jewel?
For a number of reasons. I think one of my strengths is actually being able to identify my weaknesses and outsourcing them. I want to be surrounded by the best people, and I know I've said that 100 times since we've started talking, so that we can deliver the best product we can.
Keep going. You're in a tear.
No, and I didn't want to be the chef because I believe that there are a million billion, as my kids would say, other people who are far more talented than I am. I trust my palate implicitly, but that wasn't going to be my role, and I wasn't going to be a good owner if I also had to be the chef.
What are your weaknesses?
Technology, number one.
I feel you.
That's a definite weakness. I mean, I really do believe I have lots of weaknesses, but I am cringing. It's hard to think about on the spot.
I'm really good at putting people on the spot.
I am confident in the ways that I'm able to create experiences for people. The number side of it is still something that I think I'm learning. And even though we're in a good spot, we didn't get there by accident. We didn't get there without a lot of trial and error. And that's when I become really annoying to other very dear friends in the industry who I have a lot of respect for. I'm giving a shout out to Andrew Taylor right now, who owns Eventide with his partner, Arlen Smith.
Past guest in the show.
Yes. But Andrew is Andrew has an incredible numbers brain. And before I opened Crown Jewel, he was extremely generous and sat down with me and opened up Eventide's books. And he said something to me that has always stuck with me, which is, and I think it gave me permission to relax a little bit. But he said, look, you can put these projections together. They can be as highly detailed as you want them to be. But at the end of the day, it's a best guess. And it's true. You don't know what's going to happen before you open the business. There are so many different variables, right? And you've got to be willing to keep an eye on things from both a macro and micro perspective and be willing to pivot and change when you need to.
Yeah. And shout out to Andrew for doing that. I think what he did is what we need to do as an industry. We need to stop looking at the people down the street as competition and start looking at them as we need to do this together, because the stronger we are, the stronger our community is. And it's getting harder and harder to be an independent operator doing quality work, which requires high cost of goods, people who are well paid, who deserve, because they're talented people. These people need security, and it's getting harder and harder. We have to start coming together and talking and sharing. And that's really at the core of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is to like give people like you, like Andrew and Arlen, a platform to say, this is what it's like. So, shout out to him, shout out to you for reciprocating that with me. And, so back to, realizing that, you have to, know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Before that, we're talking about, you left and you were working for a new restaurant that had 3 locations. What was the name of that restaurant group again?
The 3 restaurants were Jewel Baco, Jack's Luxury Oyster Bar, and Degustation.
Got it. And, this is 2010, 2011.
Yeah. Now we're into 2011, 2012 territory.
So still 6 years before you open.
Correct.
You really were focusing on the kitchen this whole time leading up to this point. Any key experiences? I kind of want to get to the point where we're talking about you and your business, but I don't want to jump over any key parts of your evolution, your journey.
No, I think we're there. So one of the things that I was acutely aware of at that time was how few female restaurant owners there were out there. And I really don't want to make this a gendered conversation, but it was definitely something that weighed heavily on me and also informed what I did next. I got pregnant when I was working at Degustation and unfortunately had acute morning sickness, like the type that puts you in the hospital. And so working in a kitchen was just not possible anymore. Like not even remotely an option. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I knew that in order to have a family for myself and also continue to carve out a career in this industry, that I needed to do something seasonal, because I felt like that was going to give me the balance that I needed in terms of being fulfilled professionally, but also being able to have a family and be present for my kids.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever see equal numbers women and men owners?
No.
Why?
Because we haven't figured out a way to run restaurants on a human schedule. And unless you are completely outsourcing your childcare to, outsourcing to someone else, restaurants require you to be on all the time.
So back to these Gen Zers, these sons of bees who are forcing us to make change. Like at one hand, because as owners, you're the one feeling the pain because you have to be competitive. And this is why I think restaurant owners need to talk. We need to say, like, we need to collectively dial back so we can collectively give ourselves what we need and our people what they need. Like, to your point, yeah, like, the reason I asked that question is because I agree that we'll never see equal numbers with women and men owners. Let me preface this. I fully support women being able to do whatever they want to do. It's their choice to lead whatever life they want. I want to support that. I do also believe that women tend to want to be nurturing. There's a connection between a mother and their child that I think is far superior than most men and their children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's evolutionary biology or what, but like women are very talented when it comes to raising and caring and giving. You know, I want to honor that. I think there's people that women are, and correct me if I'm out of line, they will choose family and children over a career quicker than a man will. So am I out of line by saying that?
I don't think so. I think we're just living in a time where it feels scary to say something like that because someone inevitably is going to poke holes in it.
Right.
But I agree with you.
So I think when we look at the numbers and we say there are, so many more men owners, we have to stop and say, is that because there isn't opportunity, or is that because women will more often than men choose a different path?
I think they will choose a different path, but oftentimes because they have to, right? And
Fair.
then this is going to take us on a tangent
Very
of,
fair.
childcare in this country and all of the politics that occur around that. In a lot of moments, they're just they choose childcare because they have to.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to be better. So the show has evolved to it used to be like, let's talk about what has to change later in the conversation, but we're here now. So let's go down that rabbit hole and we'll come back to your timeline.
Okay.
What has to change in society where we can give our children the care they need, but also pursue our right to freedom of personal growth?
Right.
know?
Yeah. I mean, I think the question you're asking is like, how do you hold space for both?
Right.
Right. I think this is where my time in Spain has been informative and has actually come back into play more recently in thinking about opening a second restaurant and planning out this concept and being in lease negotiations and running numbers and putting these, this second go together. I feel like Europe in general prioritizes family. And also totally.
And quality of food.
Yes.
We could learn something from our ancestors, folks.
Yeah.
Our ancestral culture, I should say.
And families aren't as spread out as they are here in the United States. And also family members are far more involved in childcare than we have here in the States.
Yeah.
However, how many times have you been in a Western, European country and you're so excited to go to this restaurant and you show up and they're closed?
Right.
Right. Like talking about not giving a fuck, like they don't give a fuck and it's your problem, deal. Whereas here, I think we kind of acquiesce to this like grueling, we've got to be open 7 days a week. We've got to capture all the revenue we can. And so again, leading up to the potential opening of a second restaurant, I've changed the way that I'm approaching this, and actually I'm running numbers by being closed 4 weeks out of the year that directly correspond to my kids' school vacations. And I think so long as you can put information out there for the public and say, here's when we're closed, this is what you can plan on. And knowing that you're saving that space and that time with your family and reprioritizing, I think that's maybe a small place where we can affect change.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So back to your timeline.
Okay.
2012 to 2018, was there an experience, like how many stops, without getting into detail, did you take between that time and opening your restaurant?
One.
Where was that next stop?
So then I opened or created something called Flanagan's Table. That was in Buxton, Maine, and it was just supposed to be an 8-part dinner series. And we were fortunate enough to get some great shout outs and mentions. And what started as kind of this like cult loyal Maine following then just became a much bigger animal.
What is a dinner series?
So we did dinner for 50 down one long harvest table in the center of the barn. I was in some very loose way trying to recreate what happens when you go to a Basque cider house. I enlisted 8 chefs who at the time, like if you were going to put this like dream team together of chefs from the state of Maine, I don't know why in God's name any of them said yes, but they did. And we put together this dinner series. So every month there was a rotating guest chef who would come in, do a 5-course dinner. And, you know, it was this beautiful marriage of high and low, of being in a barn, which is a obviously rustic setting, but being served this absolutely incredible, delicious, lovely meal.
Who were the chefs you worked with? I'm just curious.
So Masa Miyake, Melissa Kelly, Krista Kern-Desjardins, Rob Evans, Mike Wiley and Andrew Taylor, Aaron French. Oh God, is that 8?
I lost count.
Sam Hayward of 4th Street.
Got it. Melissa Kelly, I'm coming after you. I'm trying to get her on the show. She's been on my radar. She was actually the first person that I ever approached to ask to be a guest on the show back in like 2012. I drove my car from, at the time it felt like a long drive, but now I've driven so many laps around the country that I'm like, that was only a 3-hour drive from New Hampshire to Rockland.
Yep.
And I had no clue what I was doing. I must have made such an ass out of myself. Reflecting back at it, the interview did not happen, but I would love a second shot at you, Melissa Kelly, because I feel like what she's doing with Primo Restaurant is so hard, and she's still going, you know? And
25 years.
I know. I just want to get into like how. And is it possible? Like, are you worried about being able to continue this? You know, like, I think she has a story to tell. I want to get into it for sure.
She has lots of stories to tell.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
those candles, like those shriny candles that they're long and skinny and they've got the photo or the artwork of, you know, the person on it, like Beyonce or you know, whoever Jesus. Like if they had one of Melissa Kelly, that would be like in my bedroom.
How would we make that happen? So you're doing this dinner series. You did one every month.
Yep.
For how many years?
Well, it was only supposed to be 8, and then that turned into a 4-year timeline.
Only supposed to be 8 months, and it turned into a 4-year timeline.
Correct.
And that was seasonal?
No, we did once a month for four years.
And you were never the chef. You were just putting it together. You were the coordinator.
Correct.
So when I was asking you about your weaknesses, you said technology.
Yeah.
What are your strengths?
I think I'm highly organized. I love systems. I love.
But you don't like technology,
systems. Huh? No. And I have zero interest in educating myself about technology too. I also love drinking wine, but I really don't know a lot about it. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, and I can speak sort of intelligently about it when I have to. But I leave that to the professionals. I think I'm really good at staying calm under pressure. I am very resourceful, which I think makes me a good island restaurant owner.
I was curious about that. I wanted to get into the logistics associated. I'm sure it's a challenge.
Challenge is a nice word for it. And you know, I tend toward positivity and really try not to see obstacles as dead ends, but more as challenges.
All good qualities to have as a restaurant owner. So when you started this dinner series, were you conscious about not being the person doing the cooking? Were you trying to get away from that?
I think I was trying to step into or suss out, you know, in a very small way, you know, being in charge, right? And orchestrating something bigger than me. I also felt like if I was going to move forward with any project, it needed to be in Maine because I had gotten stuck on this thing in my head that it needed to be seasonal.
No better place than Maine in the summer.
Yeah, seriously. And like it is sort of maybe the most like sadistic way of trying to figure out a way of living between both Brooklyn and Maine.
Do you still spend time in Brooklyn?
We just moved to Maine full time after 20 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I got you while you're up here because you would probably be in Brooklyn right now.
I would totally be in Brooklyn right now. Yeah.
So, what did you like? Any big lessons that you think set you up for the success in Crown Jewel in this 4-year period?
Oh yeah, the
Like
biggest one being the relationships that you develop and the camaraderie in this industry. And I think that pre-pandemic, and we can go back to this at some point if you want to, but the camaraderie in the food industry in Maine in general is really strong, or was really strong. I think the pandemic kind of flipped that on its head a little bit, but you had such high levels of talent, which I feel like usually dictate a more cutthroat culture. And here, people really banded together. And I think one of the most beautiful things that came out of Flanagan's Table was watching either chefs or sous chefs or whomever it might be from other kitchens coming to those dinners and helping out other chefs and really coming together as a team to produce something that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And the networking that you're doing in that, and really like you asked, like you said, I don't know why these chefs would want to come be a part of this. I mean, that's great promotion for them and their businesses. They come for one dinner. How many people were you serving per dinner?
50.
50, but 50 potential guests that, it's a good way to put your name out there I think it's good to work with other people in terms of just the networking and the self-promotion that's associated with that too. What happened? Well, actually, before we talk about what happened, like, was this a profitable model? Were you making money with it?
Yeah, I was making money, but nothing to live on.
Okay.
I think
were you working
by the end of 4 years, if I had netted, roughly $40,000, that's what I ended up with.
So 4 times 12, right? Because you're so 420.
Oh, no, sorry. No. You need to think way smaller scale than that.
Okay.
I'm saying at the end of 4 years, if what was left in the Flanagan's Table bank account was $40-something thousand, that's what I made over a 4-year stretch.
Right. But you did 48 dinners in that period.
Shit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
After 48 dinners, you netted $40,000.
Correct. Correct. Sorry. I see where you're going now.
So, but when you think about it, if you did 48 nights of service, and you netted $40,000, that's pretty good. But the amount of work to coordinate way more than just opening the doors.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So were you working? Did you have other jobs during Flanagan's?
Well, if my job was to be creating children during that time, yes.
That's a full-time job.
It is. Yes.
So, okay. So what about, so was your husband working?
He was working, in New York, and I would just take, at first it was one child and then it became 2 children, and I would just throw them on the plane or the car or whatever it was with me. And at some point it became a well-oiled machine. My mom lives here, and she definitely is the linchpin of every professional thing that I've done since 2013. Just because she has been so helpful in taking care of our kids. But yeah, I coordinated with different event planners who every dinner we had a different tablescape. We wanted to keep it fresh and different for repeat guests. But it was also just ridiculous. Like the house that was attached to the barn is just a regular residential house. So there was no commercial setup whatsoever. When you interviewed Justin Walker, you should ask him about his feelings about the range in the Flanagan house. But, you know, no commercial dishwasher. You've got, you know, 50 people eating 5 courses, changing out plates and silverware and glassware. And we had this lovely woman named Jean who was just like a powerhouse washing dishes in the back. I mean, it was it was crazy.
Yeah.
But so much fun.
But I think just, again, like even like the level of collaboration with the event planners, like you're building a massive network at this time. Like that's going to serve you later in your career, you know? I think you just can't undervalue network in this industry.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So what brought that to an end?
So I had been quietly looking for an island property during that time. It took about 4 years to find the property that now is Crown Jewel. Commercial properties are really few and far between on the islands for good reason. And, you know, it's really cheesy, but when I walked into that space, I knew that we had finally found it.
So I knew you wanted seasonal. I did not know that you wanted island. Why island?
Because I felt like islands lent themselves to seasonal businesses.
Yeah. What's the population of Diamond Island?
Great Diamond Island.
Great Diamond Island.
Yeah, year round, it's about 43 residents.
43 residents. And during peak season,
a couple hundred
people live there, but how many like hotels and tourists are there?
1 inn, and 1 other restaurant.
Okay. So you really got to want to go to this restaurant to go to it.
Correct. Yeah. About 10 to 15% of our business comes from on island. About 85% of our business is coming from off island.
And are they taking the ferry over for your restaurant in most cases, or is it like a day on the island?
No, there's really actually not a lot to do on the island, and most of it is private. So you are really coming to dine.
Okay. What's the square, is it even a mile, square mileage, square footage of the island?
Great question. No idea.
If you had a guess.
Let's say 1.5 miles.
Okay. Like 1.5 miles by 1.5 miles. It's longer than maybe a mile.
1.5 miles by 3/4 mile.
Got it.
Someone out there is really going to come after me, but I'm sure I'm so wrong.
I'm just trying to paint the picture of, and how far from the coastline is it?
Sure. So by ferry, it takes about 30 minutes. By water taxi, it takes about 10.
Oh.
So geographically, we're actually pretty close to the coast. But what's amazing is that when you come into Diamond Cove, which is where Crown Jewel is located, you're actually coming into kind of the, you know, around the pincer of a lobster claw. And you feel like you're out, you know, in the middle of the ocean, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, that's cool. How long by kayak?
Oh man, I think like just over an hour. We did used to say that if you came by kayak that we would give you a free meal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Too many people were coming by kayak.
I think like 4 over the 7 years we've been open.
But if you do choose to come by the kayak, if you look out over the water to the left of the restaurant, there is a place you can beach your kayak, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well spelled out on the website. Well, that's a cool, I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about, but before we kind of get into like all of that, like the logistics associated with just helping people get to you, 4 years searching for this location, you knew you wanted to be on an island. Do you think that was the right choice? 6 years into it now, is that?
Yeah, next year will be our 8th season.
Yeah, are there like it's a beautiful idea. I love the idea. I love all of that, but like logistically, has it been a nightmare?
Yeah, in some cases it has. Yeah, I went through a 2-year legal battle that was really painful. The former owners of the restaurant and marina on the island were denying any private boaters coming to Crown Jewel. And that took a lot of fighting.
Wait, so there's only one place to dock your boat?
Correct.
And that's where the restaurant was?
Correct.
And they weren't letting other people dock if they were going to that restaurant?
Correct.
Your restaurant. Ooh. I don't like talking shit about people, but
me neither.
That's tough.
One of the most humbling things that came out of that period was the way that the island community came together. And when things were at the peak of badness, if you will, someone who still has not identified themselves ordered dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of pink plastic lawn flamingos. and our logo has a flamingo in it. One of the things when you walk into Crown Jewel, the first thing you see is this 5-foot tall neon pink flamingo. And they got together in the cover of darkness and planted these flamingos throughout the island, which was really cool.
So I want to come back to this, but I want to dive into like the actual getting open. First time ever opening a restaurant.
Yep.
You're doing it on top of the challenges of trying to find property on an island in a very popular area.
And I was pregnant with my third child.
How many kids do you have today?
You would think I'd say 12, but I have 3.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was curious because like you chose to have your children, and the plan was once they were born to go back into like a full-time situation or seasonal. That's smart, right?
Yeah.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's be profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Okay, back to the extra. Like, how much money did you think you were going to need to purchase this restaurant?
Do you mean to get it open? Because I knew how much I was going to need to buy the property.
To get it open, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the obvious answer here is that far less than what it ended up costing. Yeah.
Which is why I like to echo it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Are you willing to say like what the number was that you had guessed that you would need to get open?
Sure. I thought I was going to need about $500,000.
$500,000. I mean, not too shabby when you're considering this is oceanfront property in a relatively expensive area, Maine coastline, southern coast.
Yes.
Yeah. 500,000. What was the condition of the building?
Well, we had to gut it, so that gives you a good idea.
Oh. Where were you going to get the money to do this? Did you have investors?
Luckily, I feel very fortunate. We were able to pool our resources between my mother, my husband, and myself, and get the restaurant open that way.
Hey, no shame in that.
Yeah.
I like to say privilege is a beautiful thing as long as you choose to do beautiful things with it, right? So you're fortunate enough to get the money. How much did it actually end up costing? Like how far off were you?
I was off. And I'm not sure that I feel comfortable sharing our all-in expense.
Was it more than 100% off?
It was not.
Okay.
No,
Usually they say whatever it is, double it.
I'll say close. Okay. How's that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a rule of thumb. Like it's like whatever you think it's gonna be, double it, and then from there, get, if possible, 2 years of operating capital on top of it. To get things going. So you're looking at potentially like $3 million to open a restaurant then. And that's why restaurants fail, because they're so undercapitalized to get going.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Especially in this community, I think one of the things that we're seeing are owners and operators who have opened beautiful spaces, but we are, whether you're on an island or on the mainland, we are still in a seasonal community, and pumping that type of money into a space and hoping that you're going to see it come out, in let's just say the typical 3 to 5 years is a pipe dream.
Yeah. What were the biggest oversights in terms of the cost that you weren't expecting?
The building needed to be repointed. It's a brick building. So the I don't know what it's actually called, but like the grit the glue that holds the the bricks together. That needed to be completely done.
Okay.
That was a huge expense.
And was that like a regulated thing? Sorry.
It's okay. It regulated by whom?
Like, did like the building inspector come and say you can't open unless this is done?
No, definitely not. But just for the health of the building, the longevity of the building, your structure, you want to make sure you do it.
Did you purchase the building?
Correct.
Okay. How big is the building?
1,500 square feet.
Okay. Did you already say that? I missed it.
No.
Sorry. So like what other oversights? I'm just trying to give examples of the things that can creep up that you just have to be aware of. Like,
yeah, totally. I mean, our hood could potentially put someone on Mars.
So it wasn't a restaurant before you bought the building.
Oh no.
So you had a completely.
We started from scratch.
Plumbing, electricity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Plumbing costs were crazy. HVAC, we have 6 mini splits for a 1,500 square foot space.
Wow.
It's pretty extensive and sometimes still doesn't feel like it can keep up. I would say HVAC, hood, plumbing were all really significant expenses.
Yeah.
And I really, in my case, which I know doesn't apply to everyone, but the cost of actually getting the equipment out there, it's just another added layer because you have to bring it over by barge, and the barge has a flat fee. And every time you're running that thing, it's, anywhere from $400 to $600.
Damn. How many trips did you make?
Too many.
Oh. So these are the added challenges, but I think that it's also a unique selling proposition. The journey of going out to eat becomes like this cool, like, it's like there is like the argument of like location, like foot traffic. But at the same time, there is on the complete opposite spectrum of that, like getting there is part of the experience.
Totally.
And I think that this is like, I've literally driven not literally, I hope it's not literal, almost crazy. Trying to figure out like, what is the code? Like, what is the path to take to be successful in the restaurant industry? There is no one path. Mm-mm. It all depends. There's so many variables. Do you want to be full, like all seasons? Do you want to be seasonal? Do you want to be focused on experience and like location and like do you like what matters to you? Like there's just so many things that will determine the right path for you specifically, which is why I love to talk to so many different types of people, from pop-up to 100 unit like operator.
Sure.
Because it's like, you want to get into the restaurant industry, well, here are a million options. Mm-hmm. Success is in the eye of the beholder. Like what matters to you, and chart your own path. So
yeah, I believe that fully. What I was really cognizant of when I opened Crown Jewel was just how many really talented people we have here across the state, right? The level of talent here sometimes I find overwhelming. And so I wasn't setting out to create a restaurant that served the absolute best food. And we've been really lucky in that we've had extremely talented chefs. We've been on, all sorts of different lists. But what was important to me was creating an experience. And I am experience driven, which is, what Flanagan's Table was largely about, really totally about. For me, it's important for someone to walk out of Crown Jewel and to turn around and say, that was one of the most memorable dining experiences I've had. I still have an expectation of where our food needs to be and the bar that we want to meet. But for me, it's, that experience starts when you step off the dock and you're on water, and the journey of getting there, the experience of actually being in the restaurant and then getting home. But what I knew and what I've held on to for 7 years is making sure that we make that time that someone spends with us really memorable.
Yeah, I love that. So any other challenges associated with just getting open that are shareable moments, learnable moments?
Of getting open?
Yeah. Something that you wish you knew before opening that you know now that you can pay forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been magnified for me, especially in thinking about a second project, is just how much I built myself into the way that we operated in the first few years. And I made myself a very key pivotal figure in our day-to-day operations physically. That didn't allow me to step outside of the business and keep sort of a macro view of what was going on. You know, in a lot of ways, I had to build it that way. But I think if you're approaching it as an owner, if you can hire people that you trust that can make up for your weaknesses and, you know, are delivering a product that you feel really proud about, it's important to be able to have some freedom and know that the business doesn't rely on you 100%.
Right. I think having that foresight and knowing if you can start from day one where the business does not hinge on you, and that you figure out the pro forma and from day one where you're not tied to it. And if like, you know, like if you can figure that out from day one and get used to being somebody who works on their business, not in their business, it's a much easier path there forward. Not everybody has the ability to do that. They may not have the ability to give themselves a salary, or they don't have the pro forma to get the money going to be able to support the staff. They have to do it themselves. I get that path too. Do it whatever you can. But if you can get to that point where you're not in the business and it doesn't hinge on you, that's a very good place to be. So I think it's smart that you started like that.
Yeah. And I think the business has now experienced more growth since I've been able to physically extract myself from it.
Yeah, that's huge. When did that happen for you?
A couple years ago.
Okay.
Just post-COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, for instance, we have this Tiki Takeover program. So this year we had 3 Dots and a Dash from Chicago. We had Pearl Diver from Nashville, and Mothership from San Diego. And, you know, reaching out to those folks and coordinating travel details and getting an itinerary together, you know, sourcing the ingredients they need, doing all of the things that it takes to set up a successful event takes a ton of time and effort,
and
right?
Resources.
Yeah. And I would never be able to do those things or make those connections if I was still so important in our day-to-day.
Yeah. I mean, why on God's earth would you want to pull people all over the country to do a tiki program in your bar? What's the benefit in that?
I think it keeps it fun, especially for our local guests. It's fun for me to meet other owners. I absolutely loved meeting the 3 Dots guys because we were able to talk about you know, different labor laws and things that sound very boring maybe to the average human, but
They're Chicago?
They're Chicago. Just, you know, connecting on the ways that people are structuring their teams, ways that they might be doing things differently, what's working, what's not working, what's been successful for you, what's been a total fail.
If only there was a podcast.
If only. Yeah.
So, but I think the other thing too is, I think you're a destination restaurant.
Correct.
Safe to say, in a destination city.
Yes.
And when you are collaborating and creating awareness from people from markets like Chicago, what was
Nashville, San Diego. That was this year. Yeah.
San Diego. But when you're going to other markets and you're creating relationships in other markets, and then when you bring those influencers, those leaders in different markets to your restaurant, you're also creating awareness from other cities. So when people say, I want to go to Portland to go check out the restaurant scene, to travel, like people are going to, like, any recommendations in Portland, you have to tap into other markets, I believe, and create awareness in other markets and destination cities. Especially if you're like a restaurant that is very much focused on the experience that you have to take a barge to get to. Like, not everybody can afford that. So like you have to tap into those markets with people that have the money that do travel income. Is that part of the strategy of doing these things too?
Sure. Yeah, you're expanding your reach, right? Yeah. You're trying to make yourself as visible as possible. We have a 17-week season, and only 11 of those weeks are we open full time. So we've got this really small window within which to nail it.
Yeah.
And those types of things have been hugely beneficial to us.
So what has the growth been like over the years? What was it like the first year versus like percent growth over the years?
Yeah. So we've seen a 79% growth in sales since 2019, and a 38%. I don't know.
79% growth since 2013?
Since 2019, sorry. And actually, in 2019, I think we welcomed just over 5,000 guests. And this season, just because I just pulled these numbers for someone, in fact, the ferry system, we welcomed over 10,000 guests.
Wow. So almost double the amount of guests that you had?
Correct.
Wow. So why not double the percent growth?
You mean in sales?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel pretty good about 79%.
It's pretty good.
I don't know. That's a good question.
So you doubled the volume.
Correct.
I was wondering if maybe over the years you almost fine tune your cost of goods. Maybe it's because cost of goods have gone up so much.
I think that definitely factors in for sure. And there's only, I think that the tough period that we're in right now for restaurants is that your operating costs as you're identifying have gone up significantly, right? Labor, cost of goods have skyrocketed in some senses.
That's probably it right there, 21% between the cost of goods and labor. Sorry, keep going.
No. But it's definitely a factor. As owners, I think we're put in this really tight spot of, you're working in an industry that records one of the lowest net profit margins of all time, right? It's like, okay, so then why fucking open a restaurant? So that means, though, that there's not a lot of margin to absorb these increases, right? Like, where are you going to tuck it without increasing your prices? But what point do you get to where you've now increased your prices and offended your customer base? Or is it going to affect the way they order? Are they going to have, 2 plates versus 4 plates? I think we're seeing the consequences of that right now. Certainly in Portland, we are.
Right. It's a hard question. That's usually where we end the conversation is like, the answer is obvious. How do we survive? We charge more. I think that's something that has to happen. But the consumer, for many people, it's already a treat for a lot of people to go out. A lot of people we don't want to price ourselves out of reach for our consumer. That's a real threat too. I often wonder if it's like a bigger issue. And when I say my mission statement is to change the world, I think that it's going to come from the restaurant industry because I think it's an issue with values, like a bigger societal issue with values. Where do you put your money? What's important to you? Consumerism, shopping online, getting shit that you're flying in from China. Like, where are we putting our money? Should we get less stuff and better quality stuff? Like, how many people have homes that just rooms sit empty? What is our value system in this country? I think that's the real question. And I spit this quote out all the time. It's quoted. If you want to check my work, the Town Food Saved, a book that was written about a town in Vermont. 1920, 1930, the average household income was 22%, or the average percentage of the average household income went to food was 22%. Now it's 9%. So we've just made food so accessible and affordable at our own detriment because of it's not good for us, but we have acclimated to not spending a lot of money on food. So when we do try to do food right, people are like, holy smokes. Why is that so expensive? No, that's just the cost. That's actually what food costs. Right. So how do we bridge that gap? I think, I have thoughts, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, this actually came up recently in a summit that the James Beard organization held here in town about a month ago. Because, climate change is real. It's happening. It's impacting restaurant owners. And one of the things that popped up is the difficulty in, being able to adhere to this sustainable ethos and practice. So let's take, for instance, buying from your local farmer or fishmonger, butcher, whomever it may be, and wanting to support them, understanding the cyclical, like sort of symbiotic relationship between, a farmer and a restaurant, and wanting to serve a product that's local for all the reasons that we know are positive and good. But when that is more expensive than purchasing from Cisco, for instance, and again, we get back to an industry, that has a very low net profit margin. Some restaurants, no matter how sustainable they want to be, simply can't afford to do that, or else they're going to go out of business.
Right. It's tough. It's like you want to choose. I don't know. And that's when I talk to people and I look for guests and I ask my guests to call people out, I'm very intentional about saying, who do you respect and admire who's also fiscally sustainable? Because I think what we need to talk about more of is, yes, we want to be sustainable in terms of like our impact on the environment and doing what's good. When you do what's good for the earth, you're also doing what's good for you. I think that's the trick right there. The only way to get the consumer to do what's good for everybody is to play to the benefit, what's in it for you. Because I think humans are by human nature selfish. What's in it for me? What are the benefits? When we're selling, we're taught to sell and focus on the benefits. We make people focus on emotional purchasing. Do you want to be happy and healthy? Do you want to do you want to be happy? Well, it starts with relationships. We know that to be a fact. If you want to be happy, go be with people and develop relationships with people. Where's the best place to do that? At a restaurant. Do you want to be healthy? Eat sustainably grown food from the earth that's done with care. If you want to put good things into your body, the best way to do it is to eat food that is grown as close to the way Mother Nature intended for it to grow. That costs money. So you have to go after people with the resources and appeal to what's in it for me. Do you want to be happy and healthy? The restaurant industry has a solution. I think that has to be the message.
Yeah, I mean, we're taking that one step further. 2 years ago, we implemented a fairly significant and comprehensive composting program on the island. The island has water restrictions, and we have to use a disposable service, which is fully compostable. So we have a custom commercial shredder that we got that's in the back of our property, and we actually shred all of our serviceware, our food waste, so that our landfill garbage is practically negligible. I mean, it exists, but it's, far lower than what it had been. We have 13 255-gallon geo bins in which we compost all of our waste. And one of the goals that I have next year is to package that compost, the finished compost, in 2-pound bags that our customers can purchase out of our small general store in the back and take that home with them, so that they understand that we're trying to make something productive out of their waste, and really close the loop for them as a diner. I don't think that that's going to necessarily be a hook or draw people out to us, but it's a small way that we can feel good about our practices on the island.
Yeah. I've really loved this conversation. I'm looking at the time and I got to start thinking about wrapping it up so I can respect your time and so we can get out of here before we get parking tickets. Would you want to do this again sometime? I would love to come back to you in 2 years after maybe you've opened a second location or something.
Sure.
And pick up where we left off.
I love that.
Anything in terms of, I do want to leave my listeners with something. You said that you go to people and you've had conversations with other people talking about the bar, the bar programs that came in, and you talk about how do you structure your business and things like that. Any one piece of nugget that you can drop on us regarding that sort of thing and like how you structure your business, that's been like a solid way of like evolving and growing your business?
This is going to sound really basic, but I don't think everyone remembers. The best businesses that we've seen come through Crown Jewel are the businesses that take care of their people. And I think that trickles down. Your guests feel it, right?
It's the same issue with the sustainability thing, though. It's like it costs money to take care of your people, to offer health insurance, to give them a livable wage. Like, where is that going to come from?
Yeah, it does. You're right. But I think that there are
not
other
arguing
ways
against taking care of your business. But.
No. I know you're not. But I think there are other ways to take care of your people too, that don't have to break the bank.
Like what?
When I know our team has had a grueling week, I'll order something really special from the mainland and bring it out for family meal, for instance. It's finding small ways to prop people up and make them feel good about themselves. And I think, it's important to call out your team members and praise them and tell them what they're doing well. It doesn't always have to be assumed.
There's a fantastic book out there called Peak by Chip Connolly. Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
And he talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and focusing on the tip of personal needs, like self-actualization, personal growth, learning, being seen, being valued. And most businesses focus on the bottom of the pyramid of needs, which is security, giving them a paycheck, and people need to be seen. They need to feel like they're growing, and they need to find purpose. So if you focus on the peak, and that doesn't cost anything. That just takes time to focus and listen and understand. It's very powerful.
I love that.
Tech stack, real quick. What are you working with?
Oh gosh. Okay. Oh, see, I told you this is like, I'm not the person.
POS.
Toast.
Is that it?
Toast is our POS.
Labor
we use
management?
Gusto for payroll. What else?
I mean,
Sonos.
Sonos for sound. Are you using?
Sure. We were using Mies, but we stopped using Mies, which I think is a phenomenal idea. It just, as a seasonal business, it got too expensive for us.
Got you. You can't do like turn it on and off.
You can. Unfortunately, it didn't make sense for us at the end of the season.
Why is it phenomenal? They're a sponsor. I agree. Great product.
Because it's something that, like, in theory, you're like, duh. And I think that those are like the best ideas, right? It's like centralizing your recipes so that your kitchen or your staff or whomever you designate, viewership to can go in and access your recipes. Yeah. And again, I think it's just a way of like streamlining things, making yourself more efficient. Yeah.
And they're evolving to offer more like costing I think, and like they're growing the platform.
Yes. Yeah. And when they build that out, I will go back to them as a customer.
Awesome. Thanks for the testimonial. We love it when our sponsors get testimonials. And anything else we did not discuss today that you want to bring to the conversation before we wrap up?
I'm grateful for all the good people that work in this industry. It's taught me a lot about being a human.
Awesome.
And I appreciate that.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of closing questions.
Great.
We'll be done real quick. What's one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's uncommon and makes you truly unstoppable?
Even though we did talk about the benefits of hierarchies, one of the things that's really important to me is that we operate, as you said, a flat hierarchy. And as a team, we're on an island, which necessitates different resources and roles. And I always tell anyone that I'm hiring that if they like to have jobs that operate within a box, then working at Crown Jewel is not for them.
The mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. How have you personally transformed? How are you a better woman today than the woman you were when you opened your restaurant?
I think I'm more patient. I think I'm more confident. and I've become less of a people pleaser in a good way.
I love it. And if you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Oh my God, for the good of humanity?
Yeah.
God,
I'm a cheesy bastard.
These are deep and soul searching. Take care of your people.
1.
Oh gosh, well, it's that quote, but I really think it rings true. Everyone's got their shit, right? Everyone's fighting their own battle. So be kind. And just because I just finished Ina's book, and she thinks it was a key to her success, and I can understand why, and I think it's applicable to Martha too, you've got to stay true to what you know is going to work for you.
I love that. Awesome. This has been a lot of fun, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
I find my guests by having my current guests call people out. That's how I found you. That's my North Star. I believe in word of mouth as being the most trusted way to find good people doing good things. Who do you respect and admire and think that if they made a guest on the show, if they opened up and they shared, they would have a wisdom that they could use to help the industry move in the right direction? Who is that? Fiscally responsible, takes care of their people, all those things. Who is that?
The Frankies had a quote recently, the Frankie brothers.
Okay.
Do you know Frankie's in New York? Frankie's Patino, Frankie's Pizza. They have Frankie's olive oil, which I'm sure you've seen.
Probably.
They've been enormously successful. They had a quote recently, and one of the Franks said that if he had to do it all over again, he wouldn't open the hot restaurant. He would open something that was sustainable over time. Their restaurants have been sustainable over time, make no mistake. But there's a new couple in town that I think is doing that here. They've done it quietly and beautifully and with a lot of grace, and they are the owners of Wayside.
Wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Look out, folks. What are their names?
I don't know Siobhan's husband's name,
okay.
But
well, Siobhan, look out. I'm coming after you and your husband, Wayside. I'd love to connect. And how can we connect with you if we really enjoyed today's conversation? Maybe we want to come work for you. Maybe we want to visit your restaurant. Like, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, I would say via the email address that's on my website. I'm the only person that answers that, or via social media.
And do you know your social handles?
I do. It's shocking. Crown Jewel Portland.
Awesome. And this is episode 1138. So you link to all those things, how to connect with you, summary of today's discussion, all over there in the show notes. Just scroll down to whatever player you're listening to. It's usually right there in the notes. And this is where I say thank you so much for making time for me last minute. This was kind of a quick turn interview. I appreciate that. And for being vulnerable, for opening up, and for sharing your story and your knowledge. And I hope this is just the first conversation, because I feel like we could have gone much deeper. But this is for sure, no questioning that you are unstoppable.
I love it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.